So tonight we get to dive in and talk a little bit about what we do with our mind, kind of the mental side of this, and how we kind of cultivate and practice healthy things with our head, and kind of the cognitive part of our brain.
Yeah.
When I think about this, I think about like kind of the things we're aware of. It's kind of outside of some of the other things that just kind of happen, the automatic functions.
It's a little tricky, which we'll say in a minute, but most people, when you say mental health, assume like going to a therapist or working on your emotions. But in this particular acrostic, the way we've laid it out, since we've already covered emotional health, the mental part is really our thought process, what Chad is saying, our cognition, the choices we make, what kind of the story we tell ourselves. It's our narrative. So we're going to kind of break down tonight, similar as we have this whole series. So we've discussed physical health. That was a real fun one for me. Then we discussed emotional.
Before Thanksgiving.
Right before Thanksgiving. We discussed emotional health and what it looks like to really be mindful of your emotions, not stuff them down, not ignore them, not stuff them. I think I said that twice. Then we discussed relational health and the impact that how we interact with others has on how we are healthy overall. And so diving in now to what our thought life does to our recovery process. You know, we've heard the cliche phrase, stinking thinking, but the reality is our thinking can really derail us on a lot of these levels. So before I basically say everything that's on all of the slides, let's run through them. So tonight we're talking about mental health.
Are you trying to get me to the next one?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So level 4 of these categories, mental, how our thinking affects us. Go right on. Keep on going.
Another slide?
Yeah. In this context, we did already see that's, I think we already kind of discussed 3 of these.
Okay.
So this is not our emotional health. This is our thinking. Now, this is really where
I need to let you drive it.
this is now really where the content starts.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so
You made the slides. I'm trying
our
to keep up.
mental health can get derailed by the other categories. That's kind of where I wanted to go through these before I just got ahead of it. The idea that if we started with this one, so there are a couple of different theories of, I want to say therapy out there, like
of how our thinking gets off, or how most people get off track. There's a lot of ways that people think about it.
You know, for Chad and I, we talk about emotionally focused therapy that really starts kind of digging into your deeper emotions. But there are actually quite a few cognitive therapy styles where you kind of go into your thought process and really think through being healthier. What we have seen in recovery is there are a lot of people who come into recovery who choose to come to recovery, choose to start working the steps, choose to get into step study, are doing their homework. Their thought process is for good change.
Yeah.
They're really like trying to commit with their thoughts and with their decisions to be healthier. But what happens is along the way of good intentions in our thoughts and our brain and our mind and our choices, we get in an interaction relationally and it triggers us, or something happens emotionally and we don't know how to process it, or as much as in my thinking, I want to start tomorrow on a diet and eat healthier and exercise, I can think that every Sunday that I'm going to start on Monday, but Monday comes and there is something kind of getting in the way of that. And so we want to both talk about the power of positive thinking, the power of choosing to commit our thought life to our recovery, but also that you can't just commit your thought life to it. That's why these kind of are all-encompassing, all together. This wholehearted, healthy living is something that you have to consider all of them. I feel like you're in deep thought. I want to give you a chance.
I was just thinking about it and kind of going, it's interesting to me anyway, because there's not, it's not just one thing, right? So and that's why there's an acrostic with 5 parts, but it is important. I think a lot of people, we know good steps, like in our head we know them.
Yeah.
But this really isn't just talking about like, do you know this? It's not like can you know like 1 + 1 = 2. we're really saying, like, can you start to like choose the right thing, kind of make the choice. Now there are reasons why we can't, which is what you're saying. It's kind of saying, hey, there's sometimes the emotional piece but really what we're talking about is like, can we mentally kind of be aware of what's happening, start to pay attention to our process, start to be mentally aware of it. You know, there's lots of research that talks about how people who choose happiness or if we prime people to say, hey, you're going to go to this place and they're all going to be good people go to it and they have a good time. Or if we prime people and say, hey, you got to go to this place and you have to be worried about these people go and don't have such a good time, right? And I think our lives have taught us that too. I mean, lots and lots of times we've been trained emotionally, but we've also been trained mentally, right? So we've been taught that, hey, you have to protect yourself. You have to watch out for the other people around you. You can't trust people. You can't. And so some of recovery is actually saying, oh, wait a minute, I can have new experiences, which will train my emotions, sort of. But we can also start to go, wait a minute, this person is trustworthy. So that's where we can talk about our mental processes to say, I can go in and I can choose to look back at the tape, to look back at my experiences with the people around me, to look back at and have a cognitive awareness or a mental awareness that says, this is safe, this is good, I can trust this.
I want to also add how the brain and our cognitive process affects the other categories as well. We talked about the emotional and the relational. We talked about the idea that you get triggered by something and then you feel it emotionally and then it goes into your brain and you have a meaning assigned to it. And something we both pitch a lot is inviting the Holy Spirit into that space where normally we would let our experience or our protection or our defense mechanisms, our need to want to feel safe and comfortable, that is what would motivate our next move. Instead of entering in conflict, I'm going to avoid it. Instead of putting myself out there, I'm going to stay safe. And so we think those things based on our protection. And what we want to do is invite the Holy Spirit in and say, hey, God, how do you want me to interact here? What do you want me to say here? How would it look for me to be more authentic with who I am? The idea is we have to do that cognitively. We have to be able to know what is happening for us in the other categories through our brain. And so this process is not just, I think, therefore I am, or, like I think I want to be healthy and therefore I am healthy. It's really considering how my interactions with others affect my choices, how my emotions affect my choices, and then flip it, how my choices can affect those things as well. So if my emotion comes up and I feel scared or triggered, or I feel myself getting reactive or defensive, if my brain can recognize that, I have the opportunity to kind of slow that down and go, okay, body, I see you wanting to defend me here. I see you wanting to protect me here. I want to slow that down and cognitively give the Holy Spirit a chance to kind of influence that move. And so it's not just the thinking. It's not just the emotions. It's not just the relational component. It's not just being physically healthy. It's like these are all these moving parts that are working together. Like, I don't know, I think about one of those clocks that has a clear front and it like shows all the mechanisms and
the gears and everything.
Yeah. And that's how it kind of keeps it going.
Yeah. I want to jump in with you too, because we're still just setting up the idea of the importance of the mental process.
Yeah.
I think most 12-step programs that you would go to really push on the mental side of this. They really push on the okay, no stinking thinking.
Choose smarter choices.
Do the next right thing. Those are all kind of mental, like, go do this thing. And it really, they are cognitive processes that we're talking about. But I don't think you can just really ever stay in only the emotional side of it. Like, and so I'm saying, like, a lot of times we talk about like the emotional pieces or the kind of the construction of it, but I'm like, we have to cognitively know what's happening in order to make choices with it.
Yeah.
So really what we're talking about when we're saying mental is our brain being hijacked, and is it going down roads that we don't want it to? And are we making these plans that we don't want to make based on something outside of our cognitive process? We want to live in a place of choices, in our cognition, in our awareness, in our mental awareness. It would be nice to live there because then we're having some influence over the world and ideas and choices that we make.
We're not being hijacked by our emotions. We actually have a say in what our behavior is.
And I think I don't want to go too far down this, but we kind of notice it first with emotion, and that's why we preference that. Like that's why we thought about that first when we built this acronym. But mentally, you have to be able to go, okay, I see that. I see that I feel something. I notice that I'm doing this. And then we have to go, okay, how am I going to respond to that? Am I going to let myself go down the rabbit trail that I've always gone down? So in recovery, that might be, am I going to let myself go fixate on the thing that I know I shouldn't do? Or am I going to do something different? Am I going to go reach out to someone? Am I going to call a friend or a sponsor? Am I going to go to a meeting? Am I going to, I don't know, do something different?
We're
Pray
like
through
rewiring the autopilot behavior to do something different. We have to do that in our brain. Let's keep going with the slides because I think it'll lend itself to furthering the conversation.
Good.
Okay, so we want you to consider how your thought process affects your physical choices. So we can use I and me statements in this scenario, your emotions, your relationships. If I'm kind of already feeling, let's say I'm feeling heavy and I'm already feeling, whether that's physically or emotionally, I'm kind of down, I can start to kind of get in this space in my head where I just don't have the energy, just don't want to. And I almost like affirm my negative, heavy feelings, and my brain keeps them going. It's a tricky thing for me when I'm in a bad space. I have to kind of go, okay, I don't just want to dismiss that my body might be telling me there's a reason I need to slow down. Maybe I'm grieving something, maybe this, maybe that. So I want to kind of acknowledge that. But it's almost like how we choose mentally to respond to some of the things we feel can either perpetuate some of these negative feelings or give us an opportunity to shift them into something else. Am I saying that in a way that you would say it also? Chad is a cognitive guy, so this is his, I want to say not bread and butter, but.
Yeah, I don't know how I would say it. I think you're right. I mean, I'm not, I wouldn't disagree with it. It's funny because I'm hearing everything that you say twice. We need this all the time.
I don't know how you do this.
Anyway.
We need this all the time.
I can hear you all the time twice. Oh, what'd you say? A rewind. Oh no, I got 20 seconds. No, I think that, man, it's just like what you said earlier. It's all so intertwined. So, and I agree with what you said right before we kicked on over. It's like we are trying to rebuild the process. And so our
rewire the response.
Rewire, rebuild, remake, reassociate, however you want to think of it. We are trying to redo something. So it's almost always going to feel wrong at first, especially in recovery. It doesn't feel like that's what I want to do. And I've heard people even say, that's just not who I am, or that's not how I want to do it. And I'm like, I know that's not how you want to do it. I remember sitting outside one time and thinking, what would somebody who did know what to do, or somebody who did do it right do?
I use that strategy all the time with people who are in recovery. I'll say, think about what a healthy person would do. What does that look like to you? And then try that move.
Yeah. And that's what I'm saying.
Though.
Like there are moments for most people, especially once you've gotten some sobriety and you're starting to get your feet under you in sobriety or kind of an emotional health, if you want to think of it that way, or mental health, where you get to make a choice about something. And I know that moment can be fast. It can only be a few seconds for some. And then I think for other people, maybe as you get more sobriety, more time, it becomes minutes, right? And you have more ability to kind of make choices in those moments. But when the moment comes, it's interesting to be able to go, okay, wait a second. What would somebody healthy do? What would somebody who's in a good place do? What would be a good choice in this moment? Not what do I want to do? Not what do I feel I want to do? Not what would I normally do? But like, Chad, what would be a good choice right now? What would somebody who's in a good spot, what would they do? So
I also want to just say, like, there's this idea for me in recovery when I started to use my accountability team, or when I started to reach out to my sponsor. There were times when I would go into a situation where I knew I was going to be triggered, or I was in a bad place emotionally, or even like when I was financially really struggling to kind of get back up on my feet, I felt hopeless in a lot of the situations.
Yeah.
But then I knew I had an accountability team that I could reach out to, and they would encourage me. And something about knowing that they were there shifted my ability to be creative in my own process. And the weird part is I didn't always need to reach out to my accountability team or need to reach out to my sponsor, but knowing that they were an option somehow made my choices less
Constricted, limited, tight. Yeah.
in my brain.
Yep.
And so that's the weird part of this, is when I built healthier emotional outlets and healthier relational outlets, something in my brain freed up and I was able to have space for creativity because I knew I didn't have to kind of tackle these big things by myself. That's a process that happens in our head as we enter into this basically shift in recovery where we need to start getting healthier.
Yeah.
So it's a weird thing. I can't just say to somebody, get in recovery and think healthier and you'll start being healthier. It doesn't always work. It does work some, but then we miss the other components that Chad and I have talked about for the last few weeks. You'll see somebody kind of hit a wall if they're only thinking themselves to the healthier them, because they're not discussing how a relationship interacts with that, or they're not discussing how emotions interact with that. And so we want to kind of consider our thought process of recovery and how, let's say you come to recovery, you're like, I'm going to go into a step study, I'm going to get my, I'm going to do the deeper work, I'm going to get my healing. And then something happens, let's say relationally, and somebody says, oh, why are you in a step study? Or why are you in that program? And that relational hit kind of almost feeds on the doubt, and you start in your brain derailing the choice you made, the desire you had in your brain to do it. I'll say emotionally too. People get into step study, they start doing the deeper work, they get to that inventory, it gets heavy. You start to kind of dig up stuff that's hard. There's a reason you haven't ever dealt with it, because it's hard stuff. There's a reason we pack accountability into the process, because it's hard to go it on your own. But emotionally, it'll start to get heavy, and those emotions will start to make you convince yourself that you shouldn't go into it. Now is not the time. And so even if you, in your mind, want to be healthier or think you want to be healthier, if we don't consider how these play together, your mind gets derailed pretty quickly. And so we want you to kind of still kind of laying the groundwork, how these all interact. In the next slide, we kind of talk about what choices are you making and what's motivating those choices. That motivation is some of those other aspects. Are you motivated by staying safe? Are you motivated by comfort? Are you motivated by...
Yeah, I mean, safety, comfort, consequences. I mean...
Why'd you back up?
I didn't. I just leaned back. Here, I can lean forward. You want me to?
Now, I have to like turn back to get to you, giving him a hard time. Let me back up. There we go.
Scoot up a little bit. And so, she's in my shadow.
Always.
Oh, that's
Just
not
kidding.
true.
That's not true.
You're under my wing of protection.
Golly. Keep going.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the things that motivate us, the things that, push us. I keep going back though. And I know we've moved on, but I'm like, man, there is something to saying I am not going to just do what I want or what I feel is right, especially early on, saying I'm going to notice. So we got to first notice that we have something going on, that there is a desire. We're kind of paying attention to what our triggers are, if you want to think about it that way, and thinking about, okay, when I get triggered, what does that feel like, right? What physically, emotionally, and then I'm going to start to try to engage some people around my triggers relationally, but mentally, I'm going to have to take that split second moment to say, what are some healthy options? I knew somebody one time who wrote down like 10 things they could do, right, in a moment when they were triggered, because they were like, I need something literally physically to look at, because I know that when I get triggered, my mental process is going to go right to the things that aren't so healthy for me.
I'm shocked at how many people haven't yet. I know this is something at RCR we talk about a lot. But I'm shocked at how many people will have made a decision, and I'll ask them what's the motivation behind their decision, and they just made their mind up, or they just made that decision. What do you mean, what's the motivation? I think like, well, did anything emotional influence that? No, I just made that choice.
Yeah.
Well, rarely do you just make a choice. Like, I always feel like there's some sort of underlying motivation behind it, and most people can't connect the dots. What we want is for you to be aware of all of the influence, so that when you make choices, you're aware of the possible places where those choices are going to get pulled, hijacked, derailed, whatever you want to call it, so that you can be solid in those choices, so that you can get help with following through on the choices that you want to make.
Yeah. I'm just sitting here thinking too, you think about, I mean, I've heard people, say things like, well, your best thinking got you in this mess or whatever. And I mean, I've heard that in recovery programs, but the truth is, we're not blaming you. We're not saying, hey, you don't have good ideas if you're struggling. I'm not blaming me if I made a bunch of stupid choices. So I'll use I and me statements. My best thinking did get me in that mess. I just didn't have any awareness.
Yeah.
And so what we're trying to pitch with this whole process is get some awareness of when this thing starts, right? So when I get triggered, and then start to think about, what are my plans? What are my cognitions? What is healthy for me? I'll tell you what, you spend much time in a triggered moment. I don't know if I've ever heard somebody say it that way, but like in a moment where you're anxious and kind of nervous and feeling like I want to make a bad choice, I want to go use, I want to go act out, I want to go call somebody, I want to eat, or I want to, whatever the thing is, right? If I spend very much time there thinking about, I want to go do something, I've got all these triggers in my head right now. Don't give examples, Chad.
No.
Okay. I spend much time thinking about that, and it won't be long before I go act on it.
It's in
My mental process does not work against it.
Sin starts with a seed in your brain, and we think on it, and then we dwell on it, and it's not too long before we start acting on it. I think about all my worst decisions, and those decisions, a lot of times I couldn't even recognize until I looked back through my inventory or looked back through my therapy process, that those decisions at the time I thought might have been good decisions were really poor decisions that didn't consider the emotional influence or the relational influence that was present, almost shifting my ability to make a sound decision. Unhealthy emotion, unhealthy physical shape, unhealthy relational interactions influence our ability to make healthy, sound decisions. And that's what we want in this category, to really have people consider, what is healthy, what is sound, what is sane, what is sanity, what does it look like to have a stable mind. That doesn't mean we don't have emotions. That means we are aware of our emotions. There's quite a difference there. I want to talk for a second on the flip side of this, what unhealthy emotions look like. That's the next one.
Boom.
Because I think this will flip into what healthy looks like versus unhealthy. So unhealthy, we've discussed every single category, what unhealthy physically, what unhealthy relationally, what unhealthy emotionally looks like. So let's talk about unhealthy in this mental category. If your brain is, it's a weird way for me to say it like that, but if your thinking process is really stunting you from the next step in your recovery, or having a really healthy recovery process, this is what it possibly looks like if there's some work to be done in this area. And by the way, this is, I think, like a continuum where even if you're in pretty good shape, we all get hijacked sometimes by things, and our brain is how we sort that stuff out. So I don't think this is like you get to 100% mental health and then you're there. I think this is any given day, you just have to check in and be aware. But let's look for a second. So obsessive thinking. Something happens and man, you just dwell on it. Sometimes for me, I know in the states where I get obsessive, I'll be like, Chad, can you believe that I'm trying to get him to affirm that my thinking about this a little bit too much is valid. I might try to get allies in the way that I'm thinking. Can't put it down. I find that if an event happens that triggers my brain into overdrive, it's hard for me to be present with Chad. It's hard for me to be present with Avery. She'll be talking and my brain will be in the room, but like replaying a conversation or thinking about how something's going to work out. It just like
Yeah.
is hyper focused and takes me out of my present interaction, my present awareness of what's going on. Man, that can kill time in a bad way, take a lot of energy, keep me up at night, whatever those things are.
I'm in my head a little bit.
He's currently in this space.
No, but it's a good space for me right now. What I'm thinking about is the process of this and just how our cognitive processes are really designed to help us meet the needs of our physical body. And so if the way that we've always dealt with, whether it is, and I'll use a trigger, but if the way we've always dealt with whatever this feeling that isn't so good, whether it's a craving or an urge or a withdrawal symptom, whatever it might be, if I spend enough time there and my body and my gut, my heart, my emotions, my triggering self, whatever you want to call that, if it keeps sending those messages, there's almost no way that my cognitive brain, unless I just completely detach from myself, which is not healthy.
Which people can do.
But then they become bitter and upset and angry and mad they're in recovery.
I'm fine. Everything's fine. It's fine.
But if that's not healthy.
No.
And so what we have to do is be able to go, okay, I feel that. And then we have to really start using our mental processes to plug in new behaviors, right? That maybe end up addressing what we've always addressed another way. Because if we don't resolve that message, it will continue and the anxiety and the craving, the urging will build. And then we'll end up making the choice that we know resolves that.
Yeah.
Because our cognitions don't have the power to just turn off our feelings. We have to acknowledge the feeling, recognize what it is, and then make a choice with it.
We're going deep with content tonight. This is, speaking of heady, this is really a interesting concept to really think about. I don't think in our recovery process, in my 14-year recovery process, this is something that I've really tackled, how the mind works in this process for us or against us. And I really appreciate that.
What I want to say is, it's not that addicts or people that are overweight like myself or people that struggle in any way, it's not that they're stupid. It's not like I need another book about how bad carbs are for me or whatever the thing. Don't tell me that healthy carbs, blah, I don't need to know about that. But I'm like, it's not that. It's not that I don't have a cognitive ability. It's not that it's that I haven't been trained to listen to my own body. Mm. And what I have learned from my body is that I need to go do this unhealthy thing to cope.
Yeah.
And so then I go do that, and guess what? I get kind of blamed in some ways, or society says I'm bad because I'm not engaged with myself very well.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to stop.
No, but I love that because it goes to the next one, which is negative self-talk.
Yep.
How things happen or things go wrong, or let's say the example I used earlier, which is it's Sunday, I want to start a diet tomorrow, I'm going to eat healthier, and I'm going to start exercising. And then tomorrow comes, and let's say it's raining. Why are you making that?
I was just thinking about, well, you should go out to eat tonight or something.
We should celebrate
Talk
one
about
last
this
time.
diet.
But Monday comes, let's say it's rainy, I'm tired, or I have a headache, or, I don't get a chance to go to the store and get the healthy food. I have some, we call it the carb cabinet. I have some extra crackers in the carb cabinet I want to eat through. Whatever the thing is, by the end of the day, Monday or by Tuesday, I'm now going, oh, you suck at this, you can't get it right. Like this almost shaming perpetual cycle that starts in our cognition. It starts in our brain where we start getting down on ourselves, we start blaming ourselves, or somebody will say something, we internalize it, we get so self-focused, we can't look at the bigger picture. Some of that is a tell if basically the way you are thinking is preventing you from getting to this different place. I put it in the responding to the fantasy versus the reality. And here's the example that I want to give is that sometimes I think about anxiety that if an event is coming, like let's say Christmas is coming and you're going to go see family and that's 2 weeks away, I can start thinking about every day of that trip, we're going to go see my family, what that's going to look like, what my interactions with my parents are going to look like. Is the Christmas Day meal going to go okay? Is somebody going to like their present when they open it? It hasn't happened yet. It's not in my present, it's in my future. And I can start really spending a lot of time thinking about it is fantasy if it's not reality yet. So I can start trying to play out a series of events in my brain, really trying to prevent me from getting hurt or trying to manage the emotion I'm going to have then in the moment, instead of staying present. We lose a lot of present time that way. I would say a lot of people's time in their present is wasted because their brain is elsewhere, either in their past or in their future or dwelling on other things. And so this is a really, I think, important factor. It's a hard thing to do, hard to cover in one night online, by the way.
Well, and we're covering a bunch of other pieces that go with the mental piece. But we have to put it in the context, right? And I think that's what you're doing, is you're saying, if you find yourself going down these fantasy road trails or
obsessing,
offshoots,
having a hard time
talking really poorly
aside
about yourself, negative self-talk, like if you're doing those things, then it's worthwhile to go, wait a minute, where did this all start? And what are some things I could have done different or can do?
And it's the same thing that we've talked about in all the categories. So let's say you find yourself going, some of these things I relate to, then we're going to say the same thing. If in the week we talked about physical health, it applied to you, then do a little work on the physical. If the emotional health applied to you, do a little work on the emotional. If the relational health applied to you, start to dig into your relationships. If this one applies to you, then there might be an opportunity for you to journal, to process, to talk with your sponsor, to share more with your accountability team, to get into therapy. Talk therapy helps you verbally process what is happening in your brain. And our brain is what sorts out all the information that we take in. Talking it over with someone is really helpful. I think one of the reasons why mental health is hard or struggling right now for a lot of people, because we don't have community. Where I normally would bounce ideas randomly off of a group of people on a weekly basis, I don't see people on a weekly basis. And so I'm not bouncing as many ideas off. They're just rolling around in my head, leaving me to decide if they're good or bad ideas, which, based on my experience, I can't always say if they are or not. It's why accountability is so important.
It's good.
Okay, last slide, because
I threw it up,
Oh, good. So mental thinking limitations, we've talked about limitations in each one. Our experience and our hurts play a big role in our thought life. And so in my mind, I think, let's say you have trauma or PTSD. We talked about how the body keeps a score. That's a book about the idea that your body remembers times that you've been hurt. And so your body will alert your brain during times, and it might be confusing for you why something's triggering you or why you have an emotion or why you're obsessing on something. And so kind of the same thing we just said.
I felt like we were kind of covering this slide.
Yeah, we really were.
So,
we were. So the idea here is if you go, I do find that I struggle in this area, there might be specific reasons why this might be harder than other. Just like in all the other categories we've talked about, it might be something that needs more of your attention or help, like a therapist or like a step study or like something that is more structured where you can actually dig this in. Really specific journaling where you on a daily basis talk about what your thoughts are, what your self-talk is, what emotions are interacting with your thoughts that day, where you really start to kind of unpack what that thought process for you looks like and how it derails you.
Good stuff, man. It's a lot.
It really
That's
is.
a lot, y'all. And I know it can get a little bit like out there, but what we're saying is, and I'm going to try to nutshell, put this all in a real tight package.
Do it.
Everybody on the planet gets triggered, and we've all been trained to do something with those triggers, with those emotional body cues. And tonight what we're talking about is the mental portion of that. So when you have awareness of what's going on, what is the choice that you're going to make? Are you going to try to shove it down and avoid it and give it more power so that you'll probably end up doing whatever you've always done? Or are you going to kind of come up with some healthier ways and some quick choices in that moment? It may only be a few seconds to make a different choice. Now we can notice it later and we can like review what you just said. Or if we can catch it on the front end, man, we can really start to change what our brain is wired to do.
I even, when this process started for me, would talk to my brain as though it was a
Yes.
a party involved in the like if
Yep.
I'm talking to Chad and something goes bad, I will say,
We got to stop talking about it.
I know, but I'll say to Chad, my
We're out of
brain
time.
is dwelling
Yeah.
on this, or
Yep.
my brain is telling me to do A, B, or C. And so invite your brain
If
into
you
this
notice
conversation.
yeah, then that's a great time to call a sponsor. That's a great time to think on the positive. That's a
This
great
is what
time.
my brain
That is
is
what
doing,
the
or whatever.
cognitive process
Throw in
really
the flag.
can
Okay,
change.
we're done.
Oh,
we
we're
can
done.
talk about
We'll quit.
I
We'll
just
quit.
love. I mean, for me, I think it's super valuable information to share, and I want to include it. If we have knowledge and resources, I think that can help our people, then
Yeah,
I
yeah.
want to. And so this is the heart behind even doing this series.